Well, thank you very much, Shelagh Carter, for agreeing to meet with me today and talk about your first full-length feature film, Passionflower, which tells the story of a young girl, Sarah, growing up with a mother who suffered from a mental illness. I understand that the film is based on your own experiences, and I wonder, how closely is the film based on actual real events?
It's quite, I would say if you're going to do a percentage, it's about 85% of what was going on at the time. And I was particularly interested in telling a time from my childhood where I was becoming aware of something going on with my mother, something going on in the family, and it seemed like no one was really talking to us, or as children. I mean, it's maybe the way it was, I'm sure, in terms of understanding, oh, we're going to keep the kids, they don't need to know whatever they thought they were doing. But I was finding myself thinking, no, I've got to go back to that time in the early 60s where I have a young brother, yes, and it really was sort of I'd compressed some of the time frame, because I remember I was in grade 3 when the first dramatic incident happened, and it was like the incident in the film in the kitchen, where my mother was, I woke up in the middle of the night and she was in great distress and despair, and she was raging, and my father came out in his pajamas and I had come out to see her, and she was trying to talk to me, and I didn't know what to do, and he was trying to get her back to bed. And so I had to find, in movie terms, sort of an incident to set that off. And my parents, I'm from a fairly well-to-do family, and my father was doing very well in his career, and they would have some of these social parties happen. And I do remember that after some of these parties, my mom would feel somewhat either angry or subdued or something. And so for the sake of the story, I used one of those as an incident to have her kind of, because she would be she was quite the life of the party. And then it was sort of a Jekyll and Hyde feeling to her, and I found myself, okay, I need the incident that starts it off, and so that's a type of compression. And
so you chose within the film to focus on that first dramatic change that you experienced as a child.
And I pushed it up. I was probably a little bit younger, but I pushed it up a little bit because I felt that, you know, the start of puberty, being 11 and 12, and it was such a critical time. And because people would say, oh, you're so much like your mother, and I'd be terrified that, what did that mean?
So can I ask you then,
yes,
why you did actually choose to portray Sarah at the age of 10? As I understand, she's about 10 or 11.
10 or 11.
In the film.
In the film.
Why did you actually choose that age?
Because I somehow, in my instincts and in my sense of myself, I felt that was the true point for me, that I could really be the child, as well as the director with the actress, right? And let her kind of feel safe with me when she's portraying these events, right? I knew that I could come from that place myself.
Right, so it was part of the directorial process that was part of that choice, if you like.
Exactly.
I just wonder if I can take you back in a different direction for a moment. Why do you feel that film has been the most effective medium for telling your story?
Well, that goes back to how the film is about forgiveness. And it also was a very freeing act for me to do. But when I was a teenager, I was taken to see a film called A Woman Under the Influence. And at that time, I was having a tough time with my mom. I didn't know what to do. She would go off to the hospital. She'd come back. I was embarrassed. She didn't seem to. I didn't want anyone over at the house, and things like that. So I go to this film and I see A Woman Under the Influence, which is is cinema. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's my mother up there. And I'm sitting in the theater, and I hear these people laughing behind me, and I got so angry because I was so involved with the image, and I was gonna go over the thing and deck them, right? And I was with my gym teacher, and she pulled me off, and she said, no, it's just a film. And And you know what I realized in that moment was how much I loved my mother, and I was desperate to understand what to do. And that was really, so cinema and telling the story through cinema, which I happen to love anyway as an artist. And I think it has the greatest reach. I think there's something about sitting in the dark and responding to images that is, I don't know, it
very
works.
powerful.
It's so powerful.
So powerful. I mean, I think that the film brilliantly captures the complexity of loving someone who is mentally ill and who is not always able to reciprocate that love in an appropriate manner. Was that, in fact, after the story you've just told, was that a very important goal for you in this project?
I think so. I don't know. I think there was a number of things going on with me that I understood after the project's done, right? You're in the process, you have to do it, you're trusting your instincts. And I'd written it myself and I could see the whole thing in my head. And I knew I had something that I felt was important to say. I didn't want it to be in any way didactic or lecturing. I wanted to just be truthful, a moment in time of a family dealing with something that I felt was universal, but personal to us.
And feeling quite protective about your mother, I presume,
I was
at that
feeling
point.
extreme, and I was surprised at myself, right? Because I had all these complex feelings, and why did she have to be drugged up so much, and why was she so scared? And what's left out of the film too is, I represent them. I saw 2 times when she was taken away for shock treatment, and she was terrified the second time going. But it was the only way to kind of settle her.
And did it help her?
It did help her.
Yes.
And finally, at times when she would go off her medication, she'd have this great personality change. And so we never knew, my brother talked of this too, we never knew when we came home from school what was going to happen.
Yes. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm interested actually there to ask you what the view of your brother is about the film.
Well, my brother, he is younger than me by a couple of years, and how can I put this? He has not watched it.
Really?
He can't watch it yet. He gave me full permission to do it, but he said for his own sake, I think he was much more. I don't know where the tough word is, damaged, but. What my mother did in when she was not well was she would kind of put me with my dad and take my brother and really concentrate on my brother.
And you portray that very well in the film.
Yes, that was the start of it when he was little. And there was a codependency that developed that was so smothering to him. And so when we were very close when we were little. And then when we weren't through our teens, and now we're extremely close now, and it's sort of worked out. So he knew it was important for me to tell the story. So he's looked at all the reviews. But we'll see. So and I'm not forcing him.
Maybe in time he'll be able to watch it.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm wondering why you have avoided labeling Beatrice.
Oh yeah.
With a diagnosis in the film.
That's because. I probably don't like labels, but we didn't really know. That's part of, as a child, being left out of, I think my dad took us to one family gathering that the psychiatrist set up, and then we never went back. And then I remember coming to see the psychiatrist. My brother and I were waiting to see him, and I went into his office, and he just kind of looked at me, and I kind of looked at him, and I was 10 or 11. And he didn't say much. And then that was kind of the big question mark, what was going on with Mom? Is she got pneumonia? She's crazy, right? She's crazy. What does that mean?
Did anybody offer you any sort of explanation at all
Nothing.
At that stage?
Nothing.
And your father was unable to talk about this?
He was unable. He's very much like in the film. He's very... not exactly, hard for him to identify his feelings. Stuck by her right to the end, loved her. In fact, later on in my years, when I was before the movie, I think when I was about 12 or 13, I said, Dad, we should get a divorce. This is not working. And he said, no, dear, I love your mother. It's not happening. Just calming me down. But he, I remember hearing manic depressive. I remember hearing schizophrenia. Never the word bipolar or anything like that. That's just, no. Mom's feeling depressed. She's a little down today. It was kept very vague. Very vague. So,
okay,
yeah.
thank you. Talking a little bit more about the actual filming process now. I understand that Passionflower was filmed entirely in 14 days. Mm-hmm. How did you manage to create the intensity and authenticity of emotions from all of the actors in such a short space of time?
Well, this was a script. God bless those guys. I was relying. I knew, coming from an acting background, that I could be succinct with them and just get out of their way. But I had to really know what that would mean in terms of what they're acting. And we did a bit of a workshop. We had some money to do a workshop, and we called some people in, and we did the party scene at the house. And almost every actor that we called in to do that was just about right, except we didn't have our Sarah. And I'd heard it's a small community in Winnipeg that sort of knows the acting community. And I'd also, many years ago, been a casting director, but I was just really going by a gut instinct. And also, Joyce, they wanted to do it. Like, the intelligence, the emotional intelligence of these actors. I have to do this role. And they just, everyone, the crew as well, we have to say this story. So it galvanized everybody. And then we had a very short period of time where we had rehearsal. And I like to work in the location. And we tried to shoot almost, you can't usually do this, but, from start to finish. So we were in the house for 3 weeks, doing as best we could in order, and then we went out and did some of the other scenes that fill in the story. And I think that sense of continuity of the arc helped, and just being really prepared, knowing we only had 14 days, which is, I broke all the rules. I had 3 children and a cat.
And how much, Shelagh, how much personal information did you actually share with the actors?
Oh, a lot. I shared a lot. I was prepared to do that. And it's interesting, because sometime later I would get emails from the crew that said, I'm so glad you're telling this story. I wasn't brave enough to talk about my story. And, I it's not that I set out to, what's the word, be brave. I just had to do it, Yeah.
I mean, I suppose that brings me to another question. Was there a right time for you to make this film?
Yeah. I think in the practical sense, I'd made short films. I'd gone through what we call the National Screen Institute program, and I had this year off to go and do the Canadian Film Centre. And I thought to myself, now I'm ready. I think directors sort of, if you're aware of process, and certainly, in my own life, I've been through analysis, and I knew in that was sort of helping me too.
But you needed to tell this story.
That I needed to tell the story.
So it was waiting.
It was waiting. It's now.
Yeah. Okay. Thinking about the end of the film, and without giving anything away in detail about it, it does seem that the lack of a neat resolution to the film is intrinsic to the value of the story that you tell.
Thank you.
Can you say a little bit about how you chose to end the film?
Originally, what's interesting, the first scene I ever wrote was a short film version about a daughter dealing with a mother and the cat. And then the last line of that short film was "Storm is over, dear," and that really resonated for me when I wrote it. And I thought, I've got to keep that. But also, Joyce, the storm isn't over. and you can't just wrap up.
And that's what you convey so
Yes,
well.
you can't.
Is the endless nature of this distress, really.
Yes, and
the children are still growing.
And the children are still growing. The father's still trying to deal. I miss my mother every day, because the irony is that I see from what at times she was so brilliant. This is a tragedy. So brilliant. She didn't ask for this illness. No one asks for these things, right? And she tried so hard at times when she was well to connect to me. And, we were just oil and vinegar for a while. And I realize now so many things she was wise about. But because she'd sort of caused so much havoc, it was hard to get a gauge on, should I be close to you? Because maybe you're going to...
It's dangerous.
It's dangerous.
To me, yeah.
It's dangerous. And so...
There's a way in which, perhaps in some way, you really honour her in this film.
Oh, thank you. And I'm feeling that from the audiences in film festivals who've been through a similar situation, and they realize, yes, the kind of the ongoing, it doesn't wrap up in a bow, but that there's nothing to be ashamed about. There still is sort of this kind of unfortunate aspect of it. However, it's getting better. But that forgiveness, if you can really forgive someone and understand that they were going through something that they had no control over, and it's still very vivid in my mind. And I didn't, there's a couple of episodes in there that were actually even no one would believe if I'd put in,
yeah.
But it was enough, in terms of telling the story.
But I guess that your creative ability has been one of the things that has enabled you to process this.
Oh, yes.
So that for you, you've been able to work on this material, to process it over time.
Yes.
Through your filmmaking.
My mother was a creative person. My father was a creative person. They were very excited when my mom was well and things were calmer in my later years, that I had some of these opportunities. She wasn't competing with me so much anymore. That sort of had kind of died away. But I always knew I was an artist, and they supported me in that. And somehow, and I think good analysis, actually. I think really good analysis, meeting the right person who, the thing was, I needed to be seen. I needed to be seen, Joyce. But I had to be ready to be present in those moments. And so there had to be enough of a self there to kind of go back in and understand what had happened and then get it on the screen.
Before we wrap up, I think that I'm very struck by how powerful a process this has been for you in all that you've just said. And finally, I would like to ask you, how have you been able to let go of such a personal project as you've watched the film be released, be scrutinised by the public, by audiences? I wonder if you could just say a little bit about that letting go. How has that been?
Well, it definitely is the nature of putting this out into film festivals, that a film, they sort of say it has 18 months to 2 years, right? And then it starts to, maybe it's on television, or that's the kind of the practical way of looking at it. But for myself, I was overwhelmed by the positive reception. I and the people coming up to me, I had really no idea, on one hand, what it would mean. I certainly wanted it to do well. I mean, that's the director in me too.
Yes, of course.
And everybody works so hard for it, right? But it was a labor of love. And I think because it came from love, and because it was, I think, just the way it all knit together, it allowed me to let go just in a natural process. And that, again, is being able to express oneself.
So you feel heard now.
Oh, yes.
And you can let it go.
I can let it go. It's been even the physical sensation of it is like that too. Yeah, so...
Well, Shelagh, thank you so much
thank you,
for
Joyce.
talking with me today, and we will look forward to the DVD release sometime later in 2014.
Yes.
And I will look forward to writing about Passionflower at Minds on Film with this interview.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.